I'm writing this here because I've been lurking on this subreddit for a while, and I keep seeing the same comments pop up under different posts. Why didn't you see the signs? Why didn't you leave sooner? You should have known. So before anyone jumps in with that energy, let me be clear. I didn't leave blindly. I left because sometimes life forces you to trust the people you love, even when a small voice in the back of your head is uneasy. When I left for service, I did it quietly. No social media countdowns, no dramatic farewell dinners, no tears at the station. Just a duffel bag, documents folded too neatly, and that strange calm you get when you know you're walking into something hard, but unavoidable. I've always been like that. Calm on the outside, noise locked somewhere deep inside. My sister walked me to the door that morning. She hugged me longer than usual, her fingers tightening into the fabric of my jacket as if she could anchor me there by sheer will. She had been married only a short time, still adjusting to sharing space, routines, life. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that flickers. There, then gone. Her husband stood a few steps away, leaning against the wall like he belonged there. Everyone liked him. That was the problem. He worked steadily, didn't drink, never raised his voice in public. The neighbors praised him, our relatives approved. People said things like, "She's lucky," and "At least she found a normal one." When I let go of my sister, he stepped closer and clapped me lightly on the shoulder. "Don't worry," he said with a relaxed smile. "I'll take care of her." I remember nodding. I remember believing him. Looking back now, there were small things I brushed aside. Comments that felt unnecessary. Jokes about how military service would straighten me out. Little digs about women needing protection, needing guidance. He said them with a grin, like he was being clever. People laughed. I laughed too, because it was easier than explaining why my stomach tightened every time he spoke like that. I didn't want conflict before leaving. I didn't want my last memory of home to be tension or suspicion. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself stress made people say stupid stuff. I told myself my sister was an adult who would speak up if something was wrong. That's how denial works. It wears the mask of reason. The morning air was cold when I stepped outside. The world looked painfully normal. Cars passing, someone walking a dog, a neighbor watering plants. Life going on, unaware that for me, everything was about to fracture into before and after. My sister waved from the doorway. Her husband stood behind her, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder. It looked protective. It looked loving. It looked right. At least to anyone who didn't know how to read the tension in the way her body stiffened. I got into the vehicle and didn't look back again. I told myself she was safe. I told myself I was doing what I had to do. I told myself that distance would protect us both. What I didn't understand then, what no one ever tells you, is that sometimes leaving doesn't end the danger. Sometimes it creates it. Service didn't ease me into anything. It slammed me into the ground and expected me to stand up without asking why. The first weeks blurred together into a mix of mud, sweat, and exhaustion so deep it felt like it had weight. Sleep came in fragments, 20 minutes here, an hour there, always shallow, always alert. Orders were short, sharp, and rarely explained. You learned fast that asking questions marked you as weak, and weakness didn't survive long. I adapted. I always do. Physically, I was fine. Better than fine, actually. I pushed harder than most, ran farther, carried more. Pain became background noise, something you acknowledged and then ignored. The real damage wasn't visible. It was the constant pressure, the feeling of being watched, tested, waiting for you to slip so someone could say, "See? She doesn't belong here. My commander didn't like me." I couldn't tell you exactly why, only that it was immediate and mutual. Maybe it was because I didn't break when he raised his voice. Maybe because I followed orders precisely instead of emotionally. Or maybe he just needed someone to push against, and I happened to be standing there. He criticized everything: my posture, my timing, my tone. If something went wrong, it was my fault. If something went right, it was luck. I learned quickly not to expect praise, only silence, which was the closest thing to approval. Injuries were part of the deal. Bruised ribs from a fall. A twisted knee I wrapped tight and never mentioned. You didn't complain. You didn't limp. You swallowed painkillers like candy and kept moving. Showing weakness wasn't just frowned upon. It followed you. It became a label. At night, when the noise finally dropped and the barracks went quiet, my thoughts turned dangerous. That's when home crept in. My sister's face, her laugh, the way she used to text me stupid photos of her coffee mugs or half-burnt dinners. Messages slowed after I left. I told myself that was normal. New marriage, new routine. People get busy. I missed things I didn't expect to miss. Silence without tension. Locking the bathroom door and knowing no one would question it. Sitting down without calculating exits. I learned quickly that service rewires you, makes you scan rooms, measure people, catalog threats without realizing you're doing it. And then there was the humiliation. Not the obvious kind, not screaming or punishment. It was subtler. Being ignored during briefings. Being assigned the most pointless tasks while others trained. Being told, with a flat smile, that I should be grateful just to be there. Once, after a long night exercise, I overheard someone say, "She thinks she's tough. Let's see how long that lasts." I didn't react. I never do in the moment. I filed it away. Because here's the thing no one understands. Service teaches you patience. It teaches you how to wait, how to absorb pressure without cracking, how to stay calm when someone is trying very hard to make you feel small. That patience kept me going. It also blinded me. I was so focused on surviving where I was that I didn't notice what was changing back home. I thought distance meant safety. I thought silence meant peace. I was wrong. The first call came late at night, the kind of late when the barracks are finally quiet, but no one is really asleep. Boots lined up under beds, muted breathing, someone turning over with a quiet curse. I was lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, counting cracks I already knew by heart, when my phone vibrated. I almost didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to talk to my sister, but because calls at that hour are never neutral. They're never just checking in. They carry weight. Instinct kicked in before logic, the same instinct that makes you reach for a weapon before your brain catches up. Her name on the screen tightened something in my chest. "Hey," I whispered, stepping out into the corridor so I wouldn't wake anyone. There was a pause on the other end. Too long. Long enough for me to straighten my spine and brace. "He's changed," she said finally. 3 words. Quiet. Careful. Like she was testing the ground under her feet. I leaned against the wall, cold concrete seeping through my shirt. "Changed? How?" Another pause. I could hear her breathing, uneven, like she was deciding how much truth she was allowed to tell. "He gets angry," she said. "Not all the time, just suddenly. Over nothing. He says I don't understand anything, that I should stop questioning him." I closed my eyes. Anger, I understood. Stress, pressure, bad decisions. I'd seen how they twisted people. Part of me wanted to jump straight to conclusions, to name what my gut was already whispering. But another part, the older, trained, disciplined part, told me to slow down. "Has he hurt you?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Not like that. He just yells, says he's doing everything for me, for us." That phrase made my jaw tighten. I'd heard it before, wrapped around control like gift paper. I gave her the answer people give when they don't want to believe the worst. "Maybe it's stress," I said. "Talk to him. Set boundaries." Even as I said it, something in me recoiled. The words sounded thin, rehearsed, wrong. They tasted like cowardice. She didn't respond right away. "Okay," she said finally. I just wanted you to know. After we hung up, I stood there for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. The corridor lights flickered faintly. Somewhere outside, a vehicle passed. Life moved on. I told myself I'd done the reasonable thing. I told myself not to overreact from hundreds of kilometers away. I told myself that service makes you paranoid, that not every raised voice is a warning sign. Still, I couldn't sleep. Over the next weeks, the calls became more frequent, never dramatic, never explicit, always edged with restraint. He slammed the door today. He said I was embarrassing him. He laughed when I cried. Each time, I felt the distance like a physical barrier. I was trained to respond to threats immediately, decisively, yet here I was, reduced to a voice on a phone, offering advice I didn't believe in. I started noticing changes in her tone. She spoke softer, like walls had ears. She deflected questions. She minimized things before I could. And then there was the silence. Days when she didn't call at all. Messages left unread. When she did reply, they were short, neutral, empty. I tried to focus on service. I forced myself through drills, through inspections, through the constant grind. I told myself I couldn't protect everyone, everywhere. I told myself she was an adult. But at night, lying in the dark, I replayed that first sentence over and over. He's changed. That's how it always starts. The change didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, the way rot does, slow enough that you can pretend the smell is coming from somewhere else. My sister started calling at odd hours. Not just late, carefully late. After midnight, but not too far into the night. Early enough that he might still be awake. Late enough that she could claim she forgot to call earlier. I learned to read those details because service teaches you to notice patterns or pay for missing them. He's been staying out, she said during one call, her voice low, almost flat. Says it's work. What kind of work? I asked. She hesitated. I don't really know. He says it's temporary, that it's how you make real money. That sentence landed wrong. Real money. People who say that usually mean shortcuts, or danger, or both. Over the next weeks, the picture sharpened. New people, new faces, names she didn't recognize, men who came by late and didn't look at her when she offered coffee. Cars parked outside for 10 minutes, engines still running. Conversations that stopped when she entered the room. He says I ask too many questions, she told me once, almost apologetically. That I should trust him. I felt anger rise, sharp and hot, but I forced it down. Anger from far away is useless. It doesn't protect anyone. What do you think? I asked. Another pause. I think I don't recognize him anymore, she whispered. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was just stress. Service had changed me in ways I didn't fully understand yet. I noticed details now, tone shifts, pauses, inconsistencies. When she talked about him, she spoke like someone walking on thin ice, choosing words that wouldn't crack the surface. She started saying things like, "It's not that bad," and "Other people have it worse." That's when I knew she was already negotiating with fear. One night, she called me from the bathroom. I could tell by the echo. "He doesn't like my friends anymore," she said. "Says they fill my head with nonsense. He wants me home more." "Does he stay home more?" I asked. She let out a small, humorless laugh. "No." I sat on my bunk, gear laid out around me, rifle within reach. The absurdity hit me hard. I was trained to clear rooms, assess threats, neutralize danger, and I couldn't even reach my own sister. "He looks at me differently," she said quietly. "Like I owe him something." That sentence did something to me. It rearranged things inside my chest. I remembered his smile, the way he said he'd take care of her, the way everyone had nodded like that promise meant safety. I wanted to tell her to leave, to pack a bag and disappear. But I knew how trapped people feel when fear is mixed with obligation, love, and shame. You don't run when you're still hoping the person you married will come back. So I listened. I asked questions. I told her to trust her instincts. I told her I was proud of her for speaking up. After every call, I lay awake longer than I should have. My body was exhausted, but my mind ran scenarios. I replayed conversations. I imagined doors closing too hard, hands gripping arms too tightly. Service teaches you many things, but one of the hardest lessons is helplessness. I could endure humiliation from commanders. I could endure pain, pressure, and silence. I could endure being underestimated every single day. But knowing my sister was scared, truly scared, and being unable to stand between her and what frightened her, that was unbearable. And somewhere between night watches and early drills, a quiet decision began forming in me. If the line was crossed, even once, distance would no longer matter. The call came on a day that was already bad. We'd been up since before dawn. Training ran long, then longer. Someone messed up, so everyone paid for it. That's how it works. Collective punishment. Collective exhaustion. By evening, my hands were shaking from fatigue, my head buzzing with that dull, dangerous calm that comes right before you stop feeling anything at all. I was stripping off my gear when my phone vibrated. I knew. Before I even looked, I knew. She hadn't called in 2 days. That silence had been screaming in my head nonstop. I told myself 100 rational explanations, but none of them stuck. I stepped outside into the cold air, boots crunching on gravel. Her name glowed on the screen. "Hey," I said. She didn't answer. I could hear her breathing, shallow, uneven, like she was trying not to be heard. "Where are you?" I asked quietly. "In the bedroom," she whispered. "The door is locked." My spine went rigid. "What happened?" Another pause. Then words, broken and rushed, tumbling out like she couldn't hold them back anymore. He grabbed my arm, hard. I told him to stop asking questions. He said I was ungrateful, that everything he does is for me, for our future. I closed my eyes so tightly it hurt. "Did he hurt you?" I asked again, slower this time, each word controlled. "Yes," she said. Not like hitting, but it hurt. I have a mark." Something cold spread through my chest, precise and lethal. Training kicked in automatically. Assess, prioritize, act. But there was nowhere to go, no one to confront. Just distance and a phone and my sister crying on the other end of the line. "He told me," she continued, voice shaking, "that if I talk to anyone, I'll regret it. That you won't always be there." That sentence did it. I felt something snap, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a clean internal break, like a switch flipping. "Listen to me," I said, my voice steady in a way that scared even me. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand?" She sobbed quietly. "I should have kept quiet," she said. "I made him angry." "No," I said. "He chose to do this." I stayed on the line until she calmed enough to breathe normally. I told her to take photos, to write down exactly what happened, to lock the door, to call emergency services if he came near her again. When we hung up, I stood there in the dark, phone still in my hand, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs from the inside. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't shake. I went numb. That same evening, I filed a report. Quietly, officially. No drama, names, dates, details. I documented everything she'd told me, every call, every pattern, every escalation. People think revenge starts with rage. It doesn't. It starts with clarity. The next days passed in a blur. Training, orders, inspections. My body moved on autopilot while my mind worked relentlessly. I replayed every interaction I'd ever had with him. Every comment I'd ignored. Every joke that wasn't a joke. I hated myself for the advice I'd given her earlier. Talk to him. Set boundaries. As if boundaries mean anything to someone who believes they own you. That night, lying on my bunk, staring at the ceiling, I made a promise, not out loud, not to anyone else, just to myself. This would not be handled from a distance anymore. I didn't know yet how I would deal with it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't need one yet. All I knew was this. The line had been crossed. And once that happens, there is no going back to maybe. From that moment on, everything I did, every drill, every order, every breath, had a second purpose: preparation. I didn't announce my return. No warning calls, no messages asking if it was a good time. I learned long ago that surprise is a form of protection, especially when someone believes they control the narrative. My leave was approved faster than expected. No questions asked. Maybe they saw something in my face, or maybe they'd learned not to pry. I packed the same way I always did, efficiently, without emotion. Uniform folded, civilian clothes on top, documents in order, calm outside, locked inside. The road home felt unreal, too quiet, too open. My body stayed alert, scanning mirrors, noting exits, counting seconds at stops. Service doesn't turn off just because you're technically off duty. If anything, it sharpens when you're heading towards something personal. I arrived early in the morning. The building looked exactly the same. Same peeling paint near the entrance. Same flickering light in the hallway. Normal. That's what always gets me. Abuse hides best in places that look boring. I used my old key. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the apartment smelled like coffee and fried eggs. Domestic, peaceful, almost mocking. I stepped in quietly, boots barely making a sound against the floor. My bag stayed by the door. I didn't take off my jacket. He was sitting in the kitchen, relaxed, confident. One leg crossed over the other, phone in hand, mug on the table. He looked up slowly, clearly expecting my sister, and then froze. For half a second, his expression flickered. Confusion first, then annoyance, then recognition. "Oh," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The hero is back." There it was, the tone, casual, dismissive, like I was a joke that had walked into the room uninvited. I didn't answer. I closed the door behind me, locked it, and walked into the kitchen. Each step was deliberate, controlled. I could feel his eyes tracking me, recalculating. People like him always do that, trying to figure out which version of you they're dealing with. "You're early," he added, smirking. "Didn't expect you so soon." I stopped across from him, close enough to see the tension creeping into his jaw. "Where is she?" I asked. He shrugged. "Out." Liar. I knew it immediately. His fingers tightened around the mug just a little too much. I nodded once and pulled out a chair. Sat down. Calmly. Like I had all the time in the world. That seemed to irritate him more than yelling ever could. "You know," he said, tilting his head. "Service really changes people. Makes them think they're tougher than they are." I met his eyes. Didn't blink. "You touched my sister." The room went still. He laughed, a short, sharp sound. "That's what this is about? She's dramatic. Always has been. You don't understand how relationships work." "I understand consent," I said. His smile faltered, just slightly. "She provokes me," he continued quickly. "Asks stupid questions, doesn't trust me. I'm trying to build something for us." "For her," I corrected. He leaned forward now, irritation bleeding through the performance. "You weren't here. You don't get to judge." That was when I knew something important. He still thought this was a conversation he could win. I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table between us. Thick, heavy, organized, photos, names, phone numbers, screenshots, dates, transactions, connections, his new friends, his debts, his late-night meetings. I watched his face as he flipped it open. The color drained fast. "What is this?" he whispered. "Reality," I said. "The part you didn't think anyone would connect." His breathing changed, faster, shallower. He looked up at me, eyes wide now, not angry anymore, afraid. And for the first time since I walked in, I felt something settle inside me. Control. He finally understood that I hadn't come back as a sister begging for explanations. I had come back as a problem he couldn't intimidate. There's a moment in confrontations when the air changes. You can feel it, almost like pressure in your ears. That's when the person across from you realizes this isn't going the way they planned. That moment came when he stopped pretending. He closed the folder slowly, like maybe if he moved carefully enough, the contents would disappear. His mouth opened, then closed again. I could see his thoughts scrambling for a new angle. Anger hadn't worked. Charm hadn't worked. Dismissal definitely hadn't worked. So what? He said finally, forcing a laugh that cracked halfway through. You did some digging. Congratulations. You think this scares me? I didn't answer right away. Silence makes people talk. Service teaches you that too. I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands on the table. Calm. Still. No raised voice. No threats. That calm unnerved him more than anything else. You really think you're special? He continued, irritation creeping back in. You go away, play soldier, come back thinking you're some kind of authority. This is my house, my marriage. I tilted my head slightly. Is it? That small question hit harder than a speech. His jaw tightened. You don't know what it's like, he snapped. Pressure, responsibility, providing for someone who doesn't appreciate it. There it was again. The justification, the entitlement, the belief that sacrifice, real or imagined, gave him ownership over another human being. I know exactly what pressure is, I said quietly. The difference is, I don't take it out on people weaker than me. That word, weaker, made him flinch. You think she's afraid of you? He scoffed. She exaggerates. She always does. You should hear the things she says when you're not around. I felt a flicker of anger then, sharp and bright, but I kept my voice even. You isolate her. You scare her. You threaten her. And then you tell her it's love. He slammed his hand on the table. I never hit her. The outburst echoed in the kitchen. Somewhere upstairs, a pipe rattled. I didn't move. I didn't say you did, I replied. Yet. That stopped him cold. I leaned forward slightly, just enough to make my presence unavoidable. You want to keep telling yourself this is normal, that you're misunderstood, that she pushed you. But here's the truth. And this is the last time I'll explain it to you. He swallowed. You crossed a line. Once. That's all it takes. His bravado drained fast now. I could see fear replacing anger, the way it always does when control slips away. You don't get to raise your voice at her again, I continued. You don't get to grab her arm. You don't get to scare her into silence. You don't get to threaten her with consequences. And who's going to stop me? He asked weakly. I tapped the folder. I am. The law is. Your friends, your creditors, your employers, anyone who starts asking questions. He stared at the table, breathing uneven. I could ruin you, I added, not as a threat, but as a statement of fact. And you know it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, obnoxiously normal. Then he looked up at me. Really looked this time. Not as a nuisance, not as a loud sister, but as someone he'd underestimated completely. What do you want? He asked. That was the question that mattered. I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, this wasn't about revenge in the dramatic sense. It wasn't about hurting him the way he'd hurt my sister. It was about ending something. You're going to leave, I said. Tonight. You'll take your things. You'll sign whatever paperwork is needed. You'll cut contact. No calls, no messages, no showing up by accident. He shook his head, panic creeping in. You can't just… I can, I interrupted calmly. And if you test me, you'll learn how thorough I am. That's when his hands started shaking. People talk a lot about standing up to abusers. What they don't talk about is the moment the abuser realizes the power dynamic has reversed, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. That realization hollowed him out right in front of me. And I knew then that the conversation was already over. He just hadn't accepted it yet. Fear doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't kick down the door or announce itself with dramatic gestures. It seeps in quietly, replacing confidence piece by piece until the person sitting across from you doesn't recognize themselves anymore. I watched it happen to him in real time. After I told him what would happen, after I laid it out calmly, clearly, without threats or emotion, he stopped arguing. The excuses dried up. The anger evaporated. What remained was something small and brittle. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice betrayed him. It wasn't defiant anymore. It was hopeful. Like a man clinging to the idea that this could still be a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. Silence again. Heavy. Intentional. He stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal. He ran a hand through his hair, muttering under his breath, then turned back to me. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Those people, they're nothing. Just acquaintances." I tilted my head. "Then you won't mind if they're contacted." That did it. He stopped mid-step. His face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. His breathing changed. Short, shallow inhales through his nose, like he was trying not to panic. "Don't," he said. "You don't understand what you'd be starting." "I understand exactly," I replied. "That's why I'm being generous." He laughed then, a sharp, broken sound that didn't reach his eyes. "You think service makes you dangerous? You think you scare me?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "No," I said quietly. "I don't think I scare you. I know you scare yourself." That landed harder than anything else I'd said. His hands started to tremble. He tried to hide it by shoving them into his pockets, but it was too late. The image he'd built, the confident provider, the man in control, was collapsing under its own weight. "Do you know what they teach us?" I asked softly. "Not how to hurt people. That's the easy part. They teach us how to finish things. Cleanly." He swallowed hard. "I don't want trouble," he said. "I just want things to go back to normal." Normal. That word almost made me laugh. "Normal for you," I said, "is her being afraid to speak." He looked toward the door, then the window. Calculating escape routes. That's another thing service teaches you. You recognize it instantly when someone is searching for one. "You have two options," I continued, my voice even. "You leave tonight and disappear from her life completely. Or I start talking. To everyone. In order." Sweat beaded on his forehead. "You wouldn't," he whispered. I reached into my bag again and placed my phone on the table. One tap, and the screen lit up with a draft email. Names filled in, attachments ready. His shoulders slumped. That's when I knew fear had fully taken hold. Not fear of me physically. Fear of exposure. Fear of losing control. Fear of consequences. The kind of fear men like him never think they'll face. He sank back into the chair, suddenly smaller, deflated. His leg bounced uncontrollably. He wiped his palms on his jeans, leaving dark marks. "I was just trying to make things work," he said weakly. "She doesn't understand how hard it is." I stood up. "This conversation is over," I said. "You have 1 hour." He looked up at me, eyes wide, something close to desperation flickering there. "You think you've won?" I met his gaze without flinching. "No," I said. "I think you've lost." As I walked past him, toward the hallway, I caught a glimpse of him in the reflection of the microwave door, hunched, shaking, staring at the floor. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked exactly like what he was. Not powerful, not dangerous, just afraid. I've seen humiliation before, not the dramatic kind people imagine, not shouting, not fists, not public spectacle. Real humiliation is quieter. It happens when someone finally understands that the power they built their identity on is gone, and there's no way to rebuild it in that moment. I was in the hallway when it happened. I didn't plan to watch. I didn't need to. But the sounds carry in old apartments, and when fear reaches a certain point, it stops being subtle. At first, there was pacing, heavy steps, back and forth, faster and faster, then drawers opening too hard, a chair scraping loudly across the floor. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, breathing steady, listening without emotion. This wasn't about enjoying it. It was about confirmation. I heard him swear under his breath. Then louder. Then silence. A long one. That kind of silence is never calm. It's the sound of a person realizing there's no version of this story where they come out on top. I walked back into the kitchen. He was standing near the table, pale, eyes unfocused. His confident posture was gone completely. Shoulders slumped, back slightly hunched, like his body was trying to fold inward. Papers from the folder were spread out in front of him, hands hovering over them as if touching them might burn. "I didn't think it would end like this," he muttered. I didn't respond. His gaze flicked up to me, then away again. He swallowed hard, jaw trembling. That's when I noticed his breathing. Fast, shallow, completely out of control. Panic does that. It hijacks the body, strips away dignity without asking permission. "I can fix this," he said suddenly, too quickly. "I'll talk to her. I'll explain. I'll be better." I stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough that he had to acknowledge me. "You already explained," I said. "Every time you raised your voice, every time you grabbed her arm, every time you told her she'd regret speaking." His face twisted. Shame, fear, anger, all fighting for dominance. Then it happened. His hands started shaking so badly he dropped his phone. It clattered loudly against the floor, the sound echoing in the room. He bent down to pick it up, missed, tried again. His breath hitched, and then the smell reached me. Sharp, unmistakable. He froze, slowly, like he already knew what I'd see. He looked down. Dark stains spreading across the front of his jeans. His face drained of the last remaining color, eyes wide with pure horror. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." I didn't move. I didn't react. I didn't say a word. A grown man, married, so sure of his authority, reduced to this by the simple realization that he was no longer untouchable. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking. "Please," he said, voice breaking, "don't tell anyone." That was the moment something settled inside me completely. Not satisfaction, not joy, finality. "I don't need to," I replied calmly. "You'll remember this every time you think about going near her again." He nodded frantically, unable to meet my eyes. "I'll go," he said. "I swear. I'll go now." I stepped aside and pointed toward the door. He didn't argue. He didn't posture. He didn't try to save face. He grabbed his jacket with shaking hands, keys slipping from his fingers twice before he managed to hold on to them. As he reached the door, he paused, shoulders hunched, back to me. "You ruined me," he said quietly. I answered without hesitation. "No," I said. "You did that yourself. I just made sure you noticed." The door closed behind him with a soft click. No slam, no drama, just the sound of something ending. I stood there for a long moment, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hallway, each step faster than the last. Then I exhaled. The danger was gone. And for the first time since my sister had whispered, "I'm scared," into a phone late at night, I felt something close to peace. The silence he left behind was heavier than his presence had ever been. At first, nothing happened. No shouting, no slammed doors, no last-minute accusations. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels wrong after chaos, like your body doesn't trust it yet. I stood in the middle of the apartment for a long time, listening, not because I expected him to come back, but because my instincts hadn't learned to relax. Service does that to you. So does living around someone dangerous. My sister came out of the bedroom slowly, like someone stepping onto unfamiliar ground. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in an oversized sweater, hair pulled back hastily. Her eyes went straight to the door, then to me. "Is he?" she asked. "He's gone," I said. "For good." She didn't react the way people expect in movies. No tears of relief, no dramatic collapse. She just stood there, blinking, as if her brain needed time to catch up with reality. Then her knees buckled. I caught her before she hit the floor and guided her to the couch. She sat there, staring at her hands, fingers twisting together until they turned white. "I thought I was exaggerating," she whispered. "I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad." "That's how it works," I said quietly. "They make you doubt your own reality." She nodded slowly, like the words were clicking into place one by one. The hours after that were strange, practical, almost mundane. We packed his things into boxes without emotion: clothes, shoes, documents, objects that had once represented a shared life, now reduced to items to be removed. Every now and then she'd pause, pick something up, then put it back down like it no longer belonged to any version of herself she recognized. No messages came, no calls, no threats. That alone told me everything I needed to know. People who still think they have power make noise. They test boundaries. They try to scare you back into submission. He did none of that. He vanished. Exactly like someone who understands that any movement could bring consequences he can't survive. The next days were about recovery, not justice. We slept a lot. Ate when we remembered. Talked in fragments. Sometimes she'd laugh at something small and then suddenly go quiet, guilt flashing across her face, like happiness itself needed permission now. I stayed. I didn't rush back. I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Some battles don't need witnesses. At night, when the apartment was dark and still, I felt the emotional weight finally hit me. Not anger, that had burned out already. Not fear, that was gone. It was exhaustion, bone deep, the kind that comes after you've been holding a line for too long. I thought about everything I'd endured before service, the way people had talked down to me, the jokes, the dismissive comments, the assumption that I was fragile, emotional, dramatic. Then service added another layer: humiliation disguised as toughening up, pressure framed as character building. And yet none of that had broken me. What almost did was watching someone I love slowly shrink under someone else's control. That's when I understood something important. Strength isn't about how much pain you can take. It's about what you refuse to normalize. I didn't feel guilty for what happened to him. Not even a little. Consequences aren't cruelty. They're reality catching up. A few days later, my sister stood a little straighter. Her voice grew firmer. She started making plans. Small ones at first. Coffee with a friend. A walk alone. Reclaiming space. One evening, she looked at me and said, "He used to tell me no one would believe me." I met her eyes. He was wrong. She smiled then. Really smiled. For the first time in months. And in that moment, I knew the worst part was over. Not because he was gone, but because she was coming back to herself. Sometimes, the real victory isn't what you destroy. It's what you help survive.